The briefing room at Okba Ben Nafi Air Base stinks of Turkish coffee and Soviet confidence. August 19, 1981. Two Libyan Air Force pilots, captains flying Su-22 fitters, lean back in folding chairs while their squadron commander traces flight paths on a grease-penciled map of the Gulf of Sidra. The Mediterranean glitters 40 miles north. Gaddafi has declared everything south of 30 Thagwidagurdi North to be Libyan territorial waters. The Americans call it international airspace. Today, someone will be proven right. The pilots aren't worried. They've trained at Soviet academies, flown exportable but capable ground attack jets, practiced intercepts against hypothetical aggressors. The Americans have been running carrier exercises in the disputed zone for 3 days. F-14 Tomcats from USS Nimitz and Forrestal. Big twin-engine beasts the Libyans know only from propaganda photographs and dismissive intelligence briefs. Overpriced, overhyped, built for a war that will never happen. One pilot taps ash from his cigarette. The other checks his watch. Somewhere over the horizon, radar operators are painting 2 American fighters in a patrol pattern. Predictable, arrogant. The Libyans will scramble, close to visual range. Fire if provoked, retreat if needed. Standard intercept doctrine. They've done this before. What they don't know. The F-14 crews have been waiting for this exact scenario. The scramble order crackles through at 0512 hours local. Both Su-22s are wheels up in 90 seconds, climbing through haze into hard morning sunlight. The fitter is a swing-wing striker, a knife fighter pressed into interceptor duty because Libya's MiG inventory is stretched thin. It carries 2 K-13 atoll heat-seeking missiles, Soviet copies of the American AEM-9 sidewinder, effective inside 2 miles if you get tone. The pilots aren't planning a dogfight. They're planning a statement. They level off at 10,000 feet, 70 miles south of the American formation. The lead pilot's radar acquisition light blinks. He's got them. 2 contacts heading east 12 miles ahead. He arms his weapons system. His wingman tucks in tight. The Gulf of Sidra spreads beneath them like hammered bronze. The Americans don't break. The Americans don't turn away. The Libyan lead closes to 3 miles, 2 miles. He can see them now. Twin tails, variable geometry wings, the angular silhouette of a fighter built to kill Soviet bombers at range. But they're not running. They're drifting right, almost lazy, like they haven't noticed the threat. The lead pilot gets tone. His atoll missile seeker locks onto the heat signature of an F-14's twin turbofans. He squeezes the trigger. The missile ripples off the rail at Mach 2.5, trailing white smoke across the morning sky. The Libyan pilot banks hard left, breaking off, expecting the Americans to scatter, to dive, to acknowledge the superior aggression of a pilot willing to fire first. Instead, the F-14s turn into the missile, not away, not defensive, into. The atoll passes between them, its seeker confused by countermeasures and geometry it wasn't designed to defeat. It detonates harmlessly 600 feet behind the American formation. The Libyan pilots have 3 seconds to process what just happened. In 67 seconds, 2 pilots will prove that assumption catastrophically wrong. The F-14s don't hesitate. They don't radio for permission. Rules of engagement are clear. Hostile act equals hostile intent. The Libyans fired first. What happens next is geometry. Lieutenant Commander Henry Hank Kleeman rolls inverted, pulls through, locks his radar. His wingman, Lawrence Music Majinski, mirrors the maneuver. Both Tomcats arcing through the turn with the kind of sustained G-loading the Su-22 can't match. The fitter is fast in a straight line, nimble in a knife fight, but it bleeds energy in sustained turns like a punctured tire loses air. The Libyan pilots are already behind the problem. Kleeman's radar warning receiver screams. The AWG-9 pulse Doppler system has the lead Su-22 locked at 1.2 miles, closure rate 900 knots combined. He selects AIM-9L Sidewinder, the Lima variant, the all-aspect killer that doesn't need a tail chase to get tone. The seeker head chirps, then howls. He pickles the trigger. The missile leaps off the rail with a sound like tearing canvas. The Libyan lead sees it coming. He's good, trained, experienced, no coward. He throws his fitter into a brake turn, dumps chaff and flares, tries to put the sun between himself and the missile. Standard Soviet defensive doctrine. It works against earlier sidewinders. It works in training. It works until it doesn't. The AIM-9L doesn't care about flares. Its seeker logic filters heat signatures, distinguishes magnesium countermeasures from turbine exhaust. It tracks through the chaff cloud, corrects for the defensive brake, adjusts intercept angle in microseconds. The Su-22 pilot never hears the impact. The warhead detonates 6 feet behind his cockpit. 18 pounds of high explosive become a shotgun blast of tungsten fragments, moving at 8,000 feet per second. The fitter's tail section disintegrates. Hydraulics fail. Flight controls go dead. The aircraft tumbles, a 10-ton brick in a flat spin, trailing fire and aluminum confetti across the morning sky. The pilot ejects at 4,000 feet. His parachute blossoms white against blue. He will be rescued by Libyan patrol boats. He will never fly combat again. His wingman watches this happen in the span of a heartbeat. Watches the Americans maneuver with impossible authority. Watches his lead aircraft disintegrate. Makes the worst possible decision. He runs. Muczynski is already turning into him. The second Su-22 goes supersonic in a dive, heading south toward the Libyan coast, afterburner lit, every survival instinct screaming for distance. It won't matter. The F-14 can sustain Mach 1.2 in level flight without afterburner. The fitter is running on adrenaline and hope. Muczynski closes to 3/4 of a mile. Tone. Lock. Trigger squeeze. The second sidewinder tracks true. The second fitter explodes in a fireball that radar operators will see from 60 miles away. The second pilot ejects into the Mediterranean. The second parachute drifts down toward fishing boats and Libyan naval vessels scrambling to understand what just happened. Elapsed time from first missile to second shoot-down. 67 seconds. Kleeman and Muczynski rejoin formation, turn north, resume patrol altitude. Their heart rates are barely elevated. The debrief will be clinical. The telemetry will be perfect. The gun camera footage will be shown in classified briefings for the next decade. In Tripoli, radar operators stare at empty screens where 2 fighters used to be. Gaddafi will demand explanations. The Air Force will claim radio malfunction, mechanical failure, anything but the truth. What happens next will be analyzed in fighter academies for the next 4 decades. The AIM-9L Sidewinder is 20 years of humiliation made solid. Vietnam taught the Americans what doesn't work. Guns-only doctrine, visual range knife fights, heat seekers that only track tailpipes. Navy pilots watched MiG-17s outturn Phantoms in the merge, watched early sidewinders lose lock when targets maneuvered, watched technology fail when doctrine assumed air superiority was a birthright. The kill ratio was embarrassing. The lessons were expensive. The Lima variant is the answer written in titanium and microchips. It weighs 190 pounds. Flies at Mach 2.5. Pulls 35 Gs in the terminal phase. Forces that would liquefy a human pilot, but mean nothing to a guidance system running on solid-state logic. The seeker head doesn't just detect heat. It interprets heat, filtering solar reflection from engine exhaust, flares from turbines, cloud bounce from genuine thermal signature. The aerodynamic control surfaces adjust 60 times per second, steering toward impact with the patience of a machine that doesn't fear death because it was never alive. But the real revolution is the all-aspect capability. Earlier, sidewinders needed a rear-quarter shot. had to see the glowing tailpipe, the perfect heat bloom only visible from behind. Pilots maneuvered for position, burned fuel, bled energy trying to get into the firing cone. The AIM-9L doesn't care which direction the target is flying. Front, side, climbing, diving. If there's a heat differential between aircraft skin and background temperature, the seeker finds it. A MiG-23 banking hard generates wing root friction heat. An Su-22 and afterburner lights up like a blast furnace from any angle. The Libyans don't know this. Soviet export intelligence briefs still reference sidewinder B and D models, Vietnam-era relics with predictable limitations. The tactical manuals teach defensive maneuvers designed for missiles that don't exist anymore. Brake turns, flare patterns, beam tactics that assume the threat is behind you. The F-14 crews know exactly what the Libyans will do because American aggressor squadrons fly Soviet doctrine in training. Every defensive move is anticipated. Every countermeasure is pre-countered. The technological gap isn't measured in performance specifications. It's measured in assumptions. In Tripoli, the post-incident investigation begins before the rescue helicopters retrieve the ejected pilots. Radar tapes are reviewed. Radio transcripts are analyzed. The timeline is reconstructed. American fighters detected. Libyan fighters scrambled. Intercept initiated. Missile fired. Both Su-22s destroyed in just over a minute. The Soviet advisors are summoned. They examine the evidence with the calm of men who've seen this movie before. Exportable equipment used by client states against American forces rarely ends well. But 2 kills in 67 seconds? Against pilots who followed doctrine? The advisors request telemetry data that doesn't exist. The Libyan Air Force doesn't have the instrumentation to record what killed them. Theories multiply. Maybe the Americans had 4 fighters, not 2. Maybe the Su-22 suffered mechanical failure. Maybe the missile was a fluke, a golden BB, statistical noise that won't repeat. The one theory nobody voices. Maybe the F-14 and its weapons are exactly as capable as the Americans claim. Gaddafi orders a stand-down in the Gulf of Sidra. Temporarily. Just until the fleet modernizes. The training improves, the technology catches up. Libya has newer fighters on order, MiG-23 floggers, swing-wing interceptors with better radar, longer-range missiles, Soviet instructors promising performance parity with NATO equipment. The message is clear. 1981 was an anomaly. Next time will be different. But this is only the opening act of an 8-year lesson. Between 1981 and 1989, Libya spends Soviet money like water. The MiG-23 flogger arrives in crates, 60 airframes, swing-wing interceptors designed to hunt NATO bombers over the Fulda Gap, now repainted in desert camouflage and assigned to squadrons still nursing the humiliation of Sidra. The flogger is faster than the Su-22, more maneuverable, equipped with look-down, shoot-down radar the earlier generation lacked. Its R-23 and R-24 missiles outrange the atoll, track better, kill harder. On paper, it's a peer competitor to the F-14. On paper, Soviet instructors rotate through Libyan bases, drilling intercept geometry, beyond visual range tactics, the kind of integrated air defense doctrine that kept NATO planners awake during the Cold War. The pilots improve. Simulator hours accumulate. The newer aircraft shake out their bugs. Gaddafi delivers speeches about national sovereignty, about American imperialism, about the inevitable next confrontation in the Gulf of Sidra, where Libyan forces will demonstrate their evolution. The confidence isn't entirely unfounded. The MiG-23 equipped with R-24 missiles has a theoretical engagement envelope of 25 miles, double the atoll's range, enough to force American fighters into defensive posture before the merge. The pilots have learned from 1981. No more close-in knife fights. No more relying on heat seekers inside visual range. Strike first, strike from distance, let the missiles do the killing. But the mathematics of aerial combat don't care about confidence. The F-14 Tomcat hasn't been idle. The AWG-9 radar system that seemed impressive in 1981 has been refined, upgraded signal processing, better electronic countermeasures, target tracking algorithms that can sort hostile contacts from chaff clouds at ranges the MiG-23's radar can't even detect. And hanging beneath the F-14's belly, the AEM-54 Phoenix missile. The Phoenix is an absurdity made real. It weighs 1,000 pounds, flies at Mach 5, carries a 135-pound warhead designed to vaporize Soviet bombers at 100 miles, ranges so extreme that early test pilots didn't believe the telemetry until they watched targets disintegrate beyond the horizon. The missile doesn't maneuver like a sidewinder. It doesn't need to. It climbs to 80,000 feet, goes ballistic, then dives onto its target at terminal velocities that turn impact into kinetic kill even if the warhead fails to detonate. The Libyans know the Phoenix exists. They've read the intelligence briefs, seen the export warnings, heard the Soviet assessments that classify it as a strategic weapon. Something to sink aircraft carriers and kill AWACS platforms, not waste on tactical fighters. The assumption baked into Libyan doctrine: the Americans won't use Phoenix in a limited engagement. Too expensive, too politically sensitive, too much escalation over a border dispute. That assumption will cost lives. By January 1989, the Gulf of Sidra is quiet. 8 years of patrols without incident. 8 years of Libyan fighters staying south of the disputed line. 8 years of American carriers operating with impunity in waters Gaddafi claims but cannot defend. The rhythm becomes routine. The Americans fly. The Libyans watch on radar. Nobody fires. Until January 4th, 1989. 2 MiG-23 floggers launch from Tobruk. 2 F-14 Tomcats are already airborne, 60 miles north, running a standard combat air patrol. The Libyans climb to intercept altitude, light their afterburners, angle toward the Americans in a profile that looks, to anyone watching the radar scopes, exactly like an attack run. On January 4th, 1989, 2 Libyan crews will test that theory at 450 knots. The Tomcat crews see them at 72 miles. Commander Joseph Boomer Connolly and his radar intercept officer Lieutenant Commander Leo Chin Enright are flying lead. Their wingman, Lieutenant Herman Herm Cook III, with RIO Stephen Muff Muffler, holds formation 3 miles abreast. Both crews have the same radar picture. 2 hostile contacts bearing 195 degrees, altitude 18,000 feet, speed 450 knots, closing fast. The geometry is wrong. Libyan fighters have been content to shadow from distance for 8 years, maintaining separation, avoiding provocation. These two are nose-on, accelerating, maneuvering into what looks unmistakably like an intercept profile. Not a reconnaissance pass, not a patrol, an engagement. Connolly radios the warning. The MiGs don't respond. Don't turn away. Don't acknowledge. Range, 60 miles. The Americans execute a standard defensive maneuver. Turn cold, extend away from the threat. Create separation while higher command decides rules of engagement. The MiGs follow. Not trailing. Not shadowing. Pursuing. Every doctrine manual in the Navy says this is hostile intent. Every tactical officer watching the data link from the carrier agrees. But nobody wants to start a war over a misunderstanding. Range, 55 miles. The Libyans are committed now. Their radars are active. The F-14's radar warning receiver identifies the Sapphire 23 pulse Doppler signature, the tracking mode that precedes missile launch. Connolly's RIO Enright has the AWG-9 system locked on both targets, but the Americans are still in extend mode, still waiting for authorization to go weapons hot. The MiG pilots think they're dictating terms, think the Americans are retreating, think the next 30 seconds will prove Libya's modernization wasn't wasted money. They've trained for this, practiced beyond visual range intercepts. Know their R-24 missiles can reach out to 25 miles, far enough to force the F-14s into defensive posture, maybe even score a kill before the merge. What they don't know: The F-14 is already inside their decision cycle. Range, 50 miles. The Americans turn back into the fight. Not a slow repositioning. A full combat turn. Both Tomcats swinging through 180 degrees, pointing nose-on at the approaching MiGs, AWG-9 radars burning holes in the sky. The Libyans see the aspect change, see the Americans commit, interpret it as aggression. They maneuver more aggressively. One breaks left, one right, trying to split the American formation, force a 2-on-1 engagement. Standard Soviet tactics, effective against fighters that have to choose a single target. The F-14 doesn't have to choose. Range, 48 miles. Connolly gets the command from USS John F. Kennedy. Weapons free, engage. His RIO already has both MiGs locked. Track while scan mode, the AWG-9's party trick that lets one aircraft prosecute multiple targets simultaneously. Enright calls out ranges, closure rates, engagement angles, feeding targeting data to the fire control computer faster than the Libyan pilots can process what's happening. Range, 47 miles. Connolly's hand moves to the weapon select panel. He doesn't choose sidewinder, doesn't choose Sparrow. He selects AIM-54 Phoenix, 2 of them. The Libyans are still maneuvering, still confident they're forcing the Americans to react, still operating inside visual range mentality even though the enemy is 9 miles beyond, where their radar says hostile aircraft should be able to shoot. The F-14s are extending, climbing slightly, positioning for launch parameters the MiG-23 doesn't have countermeasures for. The Libyans think they're dictating terms. They're actually being herded. The Phoenix launch sequence is surgical. Connolly's finger presses the pickle button twice. 2 distinct trigger pulls, 2 seconds apart. The first AIM-54 drops from the left shoulder station, rocket motor igniting in a 20-foot plume of white fire. 3 seconds later, the second missile ripples off the right station. Both missiles climb immediately, nosing skyward at 70-degree angles, accelerating through Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 4. Their solid fuel motors burning with the intensity of bottled thunder. The MiG pilots see nothing, hear nothing. Their radar warning receivers don't scream because the Phoenix doesn't need terminal radar guidance yet. It's riding inertial navigation, following a ballistic arc calculated by the F-14's fire control computer, climbing to 80,000 feet, where the air is thin and drag is negligible, and a 1,000-pound missile can coast like a thrown javelin. Range to target, 45 miles. The Libyans are still maneuvering aggressively, still convinced they're inside the fight, still waiting for their own radar sets to achieve the lock quality needed for R-24 launch. The Sapphire 23 radar is struggling. The F-14's electronic countermeasures are flooding the spectrum with ghost returns, false targets, the kind of jamming that Soviet export equipment wasn't designed to defeat. The MiG pilots switch modes, try different frequencies, lose precious seconds troubleshooting while their distance to the Americans closes. Range, 40 miles. At peak altitude, the Phoenix missiles tip over. Their guidance systems activate. Active radar seekers in the nose cones, miniaturized transmitters that paint the targets with X-band energy, receiving reflections, calculating intercept geometry with the cold logic of semiconductors that don't care about politics or national pride. The missiles begin their terminal dive. They're coming down at Mach 5. The MiG pilots' radar warning receivers finally scream. Not the steady tone of tracking radar. The warble of active missile guidance. Incoming terminal phase, seconds from impact. Both pilots react instantly. Chaff, flares, hard defensive breaks. Exactly what Soviet doctrine teaches. The maneuvers bleed airspeed, dump energy, put their aircraft into high G turns that should defeat any missile designed to kill bombers at range. The Phoenix doesn't care about doctrine. The first missile adjusts its trajectory mid-dive, compensating for the MiG's brake turn, correcting with the kind of intercept angle impossible for a manned aircraft pulling 9 Gs. It detonates 12 feet from the MiG's fuselage. The warhead sends 60 pounds of focused fragmentation through the cockpit, the engine bay, the fuel tanks. The MiG doesn't explode cinematically. It simply stops being an airplane, becomes tumbling wreckage, pieces spiraling toward the Mediterranean in separate trajectories. Elapsed time from launch to kill, 42 seconds. The second pilot sees his wingman die. He shoves throttles forward, afterburner lit, diving for the deck where ground clutter might confuse the missile's seeker. It's the right instinct. It's 8 years too late. The second Phoenix tracks through the dive, follows the MiG down through 15,000 feet, 10,000, 5,000. The warhead detonates at 3,200 feet altitude. The fireball is visible from the carrier. The wreckage hits the water at 400 knots, disintegrating on impact, scattering aluminum and titanium across a quarter-mile debris field. Both pilots eject. Both parachutes deploy. Libyan rescue helicopters will retrieve them within the hour. Total engagement time from weapons release to second kill, 90 seconds. Total distance at launch, 47 miles, 22 miles beyond the maximum range of the MiG-23's best missiles. But the real humiliation isn't the technology, it's the doctrine. The technological superiority is obvious. The philosophical gap is fatal. Soviet fighter doctrine in 1989 is built on visual range combat, merge, maneuver, close to gun range if missiles fail, dogfight until someone bleeds altitude or airspeed or nerve. The training emphasizes aircraft handling, energy management, the knife fight geometry that wins turning engagements. Pilots practice for the merge because Soviet strategists assume NATO fighters will close to visual range, where superior numbers and acceptable loss ratios favor Warsaw Pact forces. The F-14 Phoenix combination doesn't believe in the merge. It's designed around a different theorem: kill the enemy before he knows you're hunting him. The AWG-9 radar can track 24 targets simultaneously at 195 miles, ranges where MiG pilots are still climbing to patrol altitude, still running radio checks, still assuming they're safe because the threat board is empty. The Phoenix missile makes that detection radius lethal. One F-14 can prosecute 6 targets before any of them achieve firing solutions. The mathematics are brutal. 6 missiles, 6 kills, 0 merge. The Libyans are flying MiG-23s in 1989 with 1970s doctrine against an enemy operating in a different dimension of warfare. The ejected pilots are debriefed within hours of rescue. Their testimony is consistent. No visual contact with American fighters, no warning beyond radar lock, no opportunity to employ weapons. Both describe the same sequence: radar warning receiver activation, immediate defensive maneuvers, missile impact before they could process the threat. The timeline doesn't make sense to the debriefers. How can missiles launched at 47 miles hit maneuvering targets? The Soviet advisors know how. They've seen Phoenix test footage, read the intelligence assessments, understand the capability. What surprises them is the willingness to use it. The AIM-54 cost $1 million per copy in 1989 currency, expensive ammunition for border patrol. The Americans just spent $2 million in 90 seconds to enforce a political statement about international waters. The lesson isn't lost on the Libyan Air Force. Within weeks, patrol patterns change. Intercept profiles become less aggressive. The standing orders shift from challenge American incursions to monitor and report. Fighter pilots who've spent 8 years training for the rematch against F-14s are suddenly told the rematch isn't happening. But doctrine is harder to kill than aircraft. The same training manuals remain in circulation. The same Soviet instructors teach the same visual range tactics. The same assumptions about American reluctance to escalate persist in planning documents. Libya buys more MiG-23s, integrates them into air defense networks, practices intercepts against hypothetical aggressors who politely close to within 20 miles before shooting. The F-14 crews return to routine patrols. Gun camera footage from January 4, 1989, joins the 1981 tapes in classified archives. Aviators brief the engagement at Topgun, at Fallon, at every Navy fighter weapons school where the question, "What if?" gets answered with telemetry data and radar plots. The lesson is simple. Technology advantage means nothing if doctrine doesn't exploit it. The Libyans had newer aircraft in 1989 than 1981. They still lost in 90 seconds because they fought a Vietnam-era war against a post-Vietnam weapon system. The philosophical mismatch is permanent. The Soviets train client states for wars they understand. Close range, attrition-based, numerically favorable. The Americans build systems to avoid those wars entirely. Kill at range, deny the merge. Force the enemy to fight on terms where training and courage don't matter, because the missiles arrive before pilots see threats. The Gulf of Sidra goes quiet. Libyan fighters stop aggressive intercepts. The disputed line becomes de facto American airspace. And yet, the legend will claim neither incident ever happened. The wreckage is still sinking when the denials begin. Libyan state television broadcasts within 6 hours of the second incident. The anchor, crisp uniform, carefully neutral expression, reads a prepared statement. No Libyan aircraft were lost on January 4, 1989. The American claims are fabrications, provocations designed to justify aggressive patrols in sovereign Libyan waters. Any suggestion that 2 MiG-23 fighters were shot down is imperialist propaganda. The Libyan Arab Air Force maintains full operational strength. Gaddafi himself appears 2 days later, relaxed in military fatigues, dismissing the so-called engagement as American fantasy. He claims the U.S. Navy fabricated radar tapes, staged gun camera footage, manufactured wreckage to legitimize their violation of the Gulf of Sidra. The speech is broadcast across North Africa and the Middle East, confident, defiant, utterly disconnected from the reality captured on carrier data links. But the radio intercepts tell a different story. American SIGINT aircraft recorded the entire engagement. The voice transcripts are classified, but fragments leak through intelligence channels. Libyan ground control frantically calling the MiG call signs, demanding status reports, getting only static. Rescue helicopter chatter confirming 2 ejected pilots recovered from the Mediterranean. Damage control officers at Libyan air bases scrambling to explain how 2 aircraft departed on a routine patrol and never returned. The physical evidence is harder to deny. Both MiG pilots survived ejection. Both are debriefed by Libyan intelligence, Soviet advisors, regime officials desperate to understand how 2 modern interceptors died without firing a shot. The pilot's testimony is consistent, detailed, and catastrophic for the narrative Gaddafi wants to tell. They were locked. They maneuvered defensively. Missiles hit them from distances their doctrine said were impossible. The reports are classified. The pilots are reassigned to non-combat roles. Their accounts never reach Libyan state media. The same pattern repeats for the 1981 incident. Official Libyan records acknowledge no Su-22 losses on August 19th. No pilot ejections. No engagement whatsoever. The Americans supposedly invented the confrontation, perhaps shot down their own aircraft in a training accident, then blamed Libya to justify carrier operations. The denial is repeated so consistently across so many years that portions of the international community begin treating both Sidra incidents as disputed events, American claims versus Libyan denials, truth unknowable. Except the truth is on tape. Gun camera footage from both engagements exists in Navy archives, grainy, time-stamped, showing sidewinders tracking into Su-22s and Phoenix missiles detonating against MiG-23s. Radar telemetry confirms every timeline, every range, every intercept geometry. The debriefs from American pilots are clinical, factual, corroborated by multiple sensors and witnesses. The evidence isn't ambiguous. But evidence doesn't control the narrative when a regime has state television and no accountability. The Soviet Union, Libya's primary military supplier, never publicly confirms or denies the incidents. Internal assessments acknowledge the losses, analyze what went wrong, recommend doctrinal changes that client states largely ignore. But Moscow has no incentive to advertise that its export fighters and training doctrine failed catastrophically against American systems. The official Soviet position is silence. The Arab League issues statements condemning American aggression, but stops short of endorsing Libya's version of events. Too many member states have intelligence services, radar tapes, pilot debriefs that contradict Gaddafi's denials. The incidents become an open secret. Everyone knows what happened. Nobody wants to publicly embarrass a fellow Arab nation by confirming it. And so, the mythology persists. Libyan school children learn that their Air Force heroically resisted American imperialism. Veterans repeat the official story. The wreckage rusts on the Mediterranean floor, visited only by fish and submarines. The denials will outlive the regime itself. 4 aircraft destroyed, 0 American losses, 8 years apart. Same Gulf, same lesson. The numbers are clinical, but the meaning is carved in titanium. The Gulf of Sidra belongs to whoever can enforce their claim at ranges beyond visual contact. Libya declared sovereignty with radar stations and rhetoric. The United States enforced international law with missiles that arrive before warning systems comprehend the threat. The contested line Gaddafi drew across the Mediterranean becomes irrelevant when every aircraft that challenges it falls from the sky in fragments. The tactical arithmetic is merciless. In 1981, 2 Su-22s engaged 2 F-14s at close range with Soviet heat-seekers. Both Libyans die in 67 seconds. In 1989, 2 MiG-23s with better radar and longer-range missiles close on 2 F-14s from beyond visual range. Both Libyans die in 90 seconds without achieving firing solutions. The common variable isn't pilot skill or aircraft performance. It's the assumption that American fighters will fight fair, close to gun range, merge on equal terms, engage in the kind of turning dogfight where courage and training decide outcomes. The F-14 never offers that fight. It kills at 47 miles with missiles designed to vaporize Soviet bombers. It kills at 1 mile with all-aspect heat-seekers that ignore flares and track through chaff. It kills with radar systems that see targets before those targets know they're being hunted. The capability gap isn't measured in speed or maneuverability. It's measured in the distance between threat detection and death. The Libyan Air Force never recovers its confidence. Patrol patterns after 1989 avoid American formations. Intercepts become observation missions, track from distance, report, disengage. The aggressive posture that characterized Libyan doctrine through the 1980s evaporates. Pilots who once scrambled to challenge U.S. Navy fighters now receive standing orders to maintain separation. The Gulf of Sidra becomes de facto international airspace, patrolled by carriers that operate with impunity. Gaddafi's regime continues denying both incidents for 22 more years. The denials appear in state media, diplomatic cables, official histories. But the Libyan Air Force's behavior tells the truth. They stop contesting the disputed waters. Stop testing American resolve. Stop pretending their Soviet equipment and Soviet training can compete with systems designed to fight the Cold War they're no longer invited to. The broader lesson echoes through every Air Force that learned warfare from Soviet doctrine. Visual range tactics, merged geometry, dogfight training, all obsolete the moment an enemy decides to kill beyond the horizon. The MiG-23 was a capable aircraft flown by trained pilots operating under competent command. None of it mattered. The fight ended before it began because the Americans had already decided not to fight fair. The F-14 Tomcat retires from U.S. Navy service in 2006. The Phoenix missile is withdrawn years earlier. Too expensive, too specialized for post-Cold War conflicts where enemies don't fly fighters. But for 16 years between 1981 and 1989 and 2006, the combination owned the Gulf of Sidra. 4 kills, 2 separate engagements, same predictable outcome. The wreckage still rests on the Mediterranean floor. 2 Su-22s, 2 MiG-23s, steel monuments to the terminal velocity of certainty. The Libyan pilots who flew them were confident in their training, their equipment, their nation's right to defend claimed territory. Confidence without technological parity is just noise at altitude. Noise the F-14's AWG-9 radar filtered out before the first missile left the rail. Libya claimed the Gulf. America enforced the answer. The debris field marks the difference between declaring and proving. 4 aircraft, 8 years. One lesson, demonstrated twice for anyone still uncertain about the price of challenging aviation superiority with outdated assumptions.